A woman in 1957 could reach into the second drawer without looking and find the church key, the rubber bands, the book of matches from a restaurant her husband took her to once. That drawer is gone now. The whole kitchen is gone. Number 19 sat in the middle of every supper table in America, and most people under 40 have never seen one. Number 4 made a sound every single morning that a whole generation can still hear with their eyes closed. These were not luxury items. They were ordinary things in ordinary kitchens, and one by one they all disappeared. Here are 25 things every 1950s kitchen had that nobody has anymore. Number 25. The wall-mounted bottle opener. There was one screwed into the doorframe or the side of a cabinet in every kitchen in America, and nobody thought twice about it. Coca-Cola, Knee-High, Royal Crown, every bottle that came through that door got its cap popped on the same little piece of cast iron bolted to the wood. The paint around it was chipped from years of use. The caps fell straight to the floor, and your mother swept them up with everything else at the end of the night. No one bought these at a store. They came free from the soda man, or the hardware store tacked one on the wall when your father bought a new set of hinges. Today, every bottle has a twist-off cap, and that little piece of iron has no job left to do. Number 24. The S&H green stamps drawer. Your mother saved those stamps like money because they were money. Every trip to the grocery store, every fill-up at the gas station, she collected those little green stamps and brought them home in a paper sack. The kitchen had a drawer or a shoebox or a corner of the counter where the booklets piled up. You sat at the table on a Saturday afternoon licking stamps and pressing them into pages while she flipped through the catalog, deciding between a toaster and a set of bath towels. By the 1960s, the company printed more stamps than the United States Post Office printed postage. Entire households furnished their kitchens one booklet at a time. The program faded out, and the drawer became just a drawer again. Before I go further, for the folks who love these old kitchens and want to cook the way the women who stood in them did, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. The Hourglass Egg Timer. A little glass tube filled with sand sitting on the windowsill next to the salt and pepper shakers. You flipped it, and when the sand ran out, your eggs were done. There was no beep, no buzz, no digital display. You watched the sand fall, or you forgot about it, and the eggs went hard. Every dime store sold them. Every kitchen had one. They cost almost nothing, and they broke if you knocked them off the counter, so your mother kept hers pushed back against the window where nobody could reach it. Digital timers killed them, phones killed them, but nothing ever replaced the sight of sand falling through glass on a quiet morning. Number 22. The string holder. A small ceramic or cast iron container shaped like a tomato, or a cat or a rooster, hung on the wall or sat on the counter with a ball of cotton string coiled inside. You pulled the string through a small hole in the top and cut it with a knife. Your mother used it for tying roasts, bundling newspapers, wrapping packages, closing bread bags, and 100 other things that tape does now. It was always there, always full, always within reach. Some were plain, some were hand-painted, and the nice ones were made in Japan and said so on the bottom. Nobody makes them anymore because nobody keeps string in the kitchen anymore. Number 21. The metal ice cube tray with the pull-up lever. You filled it at the sink, slid it into the freezer, and waited. When the cubes were ready, you grabbed the handle, pulled the lever up, and the divider cracked every cube loose at once. It made a sound like nothing else in the kitchen. The trays were aluminum, and if your hands were wet, they stuck to the metal in the winter. Your fingers burned from the cold every single time. The cubes came out cloudy and rough-edged, not smooth and clear like the ones from a plastic tray. But they were ice, and they were yours. And your father dropped them into a glass of iced tea every night after supper without saying a word about it. Plastic trays replaced them. Then automatic ice makers buried them for good. A kitchen used to be a permanent thing. The table was heavy. The stove was cast iron. The clock on the wall had been there since the house was new. Nothing matched because nothing was bought at the same time, and nothing was thrown away because nothing was broken. A woman stood at that counter in 1955 and used the same flour sifter her mother gave her when she married. She did not redecorate. She did not renovate. She cooked. The kitchen was not a showroom. It was a workroom, and everything in it had a purpose and a place. Today, a kitchen gets gutted every 10 years because a color went out of fashion. In 1955, the color of the counter did not matter. What mattered was that the bread got baked and the family got fed. Number 20. Speckled enamelware pots. White with blue or black speckles, thin and light, with a wire handle and a lid that never fit quite right. They dented if you looked at them wrong, and the enamel chipped down to bare metal at the rim where the spoon hit. Your mother boiled potatoes in one, heated soup in another, and made oatmeal in the smallest one every winter morning. They were cheap when they were new and nearly indestructible despite looking like they had been through a war. Some people called them graniteware. Some called them spatterware. Hardware stores stacked them on shelves by the dozen. Today they show up at antique malls for $30 a piece, and people use them as decoration instead of cooking in them. Number 19. The Lazy Susan. A round wooden or plastic turntable sat in the center of the kitchen table, and on it went the salt, the pepper, the sugar bowl, the napkin holder, sometimes the ketchup, sometimes a jar of pickles. You spun it to pass something instead of reaching across the table, and it made a quiet scraping sound on the formica every time it turned. The name is old. Furniture makers in New England were building them long before anyone put one on a kitchen table. But it was the 1950s that put a Lazy Susan in every home in America. Department stores sold them in every material you could name. Wooden ones with a clear lacquer finish. Plastic ones in turquoise and pink. Chrome ones with glass inserts. Tiered ones for parties that held olives on one level and cheese on another. They were standard issue for a dinner table the way a tablecloth was standard issue, and to set the table without one felt like forgetting the salt. Then kitchens got smaller, tables got smaller, families stopped eating together every night, and when they did, the food came straight from the stove to the plate without sitting in the center of anything. The Lazy Susan lost its job the same way a lot of these things lost their jobs. Not because something better came along, because the routine it belonged to simply stopped. You can still buy one today, but it lives on a shelf at a kitchen store between a garlic press and a set of silicone spatulas, and nobody under 40 knows what it was really for. Number 18. Melmac Dinnerware. Plates, cups, bowls, and saucers made from melamine plastic, sold in pastel colors that matched your kitchen curtains. They were lightweight, almost impossible to break, and completely heat-resistant, which made them perfect for a house full of children who dropped everything. Melmac was not fine china. Nobody put it in a display cabinet. It went on the table every night because it could take a beating. The colors faded after years in the dishwater, and the surface scratched until it looked dull, but the plates never cracked and they never chipped. Entire sets sold for a few dollars at Woolworths and Kresge's. When stoneware and ceramic came back into fashion in the late 1960s, Melmac fell out of favor. People wanted plates that looked like plates, not plastic that looked like candy. Number 17. Linoleum countertops. Before granite, before laminate, before butcher block, there was linoleum, and it covered every flat surface in the kitchen. Counters, tables, sometimes the top of the icebox. It came in rolls, and your father or the landlord glued it down with paste and trimmed it with a razor blade. The patterns were geometric or floral, and after a few years of hot pots and sharp knives, the surface cracked and the edges curled up. Your mother kept a cutting board over the worst spot because replacing the linoleum meant pulling the whole sheet off and starting over. It was cheap, it was practical, and it looked fine until it did not. Formica eventually replaced it on counters, and tile finished the job. Number 16. The wall-mounted hand crank can opener. Bolted to the wall at counter height, painted the same color as the kitchen, and used every single day. You clamped the can under the blade, turned the handle, and the lid came off in a curling strip of tin that could slice your finger open if you were not careful. Campbell's soup, Del Monte peaches, Spam, evaporated milk, every can in the pantry passed through that opener. It never needed batteries, it never broke, and when it got dull, your father sharpened the blade with a file and bolted it back to the wall. Electric can openers replaced them in the 1960s, and the wall-mounted ones left behind 2 screw holes that nobody bothered to fill. The women who ran those kitchens never called themselves cooks. They were mothers, wives, daughters, neighbors, and they cooked because someone had to. 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and not one of them kept a record of how many times they stood at that stove. Nobody counted. Nobody measured the hours. The work was invisible because it was constant, and it was constant because a family had to eat. A man came home at 5:30 and sat down at a table that was already set. Children ran in from the yard and washed their hands because they were told to. The food appeared. The plates were cleared. And the woman who made it all happen wiped the counter, turned off the light, and did it again the next day. Number 15. The milk box. A small insulated metal or wooden box built into the outside wall of the house, right next to the back door. The milkman opened the outside panel, left the bottles, and your mother opened the inside panel and pulled them into the kitchen without stepping outside. It was a system built on trust. You left the empties out, and full ones appeared before breakfast. In cities, the boxes were smaller and bolted to the porch railing. In the country, they were sometimes just a wooden crate with a hinged lid. The milk was whole, not homogenized in most places, and the cream rose to the top in a thick yellow layer that your mother skimmed off for coffee. Home delivery died out by the 1970s, and the boxes were painted over or bricked up. Number 14. The chrome kitchen step stool. Every kitchen had one, usually white or red with chrome legs and a padded vinyl seat. You pulled it out from next to the refrigerator when you needed to reach the top shelf, and your mother used it 10 times a day to get to the cereal bowls, the good plates, the spice jars she kept up high, the shelf above the stove where the cookie tin sat. It folded flat. The steps flipped down when you pulled the seat forward. And when you sat on it, it wobbled just enough to make you nervous, but never enough to fall. Costco made the most famous ones. They came in red, yellow, white, and that particular shade of turquoise that only existed in 1950s kitchens. The vinyl on the seat cracked after a few years, and the chrome pitted if it got wet, but the frame lasted forever because it was built from steel thick enough to hold a grown man standing on the top step to change a light bulb. Children stood on them to reach the sink. Grandmothers stood on them to reach the shelf. And everyone in the family sat on them when all the chairs at the table were taken. That stool was not furniture. It was a tool, the same way a hammer was a tool, and it worked every day without complaint. Today, a kitchen step stool is a folding aluminum ladder that lives in the garage. It does not have a seat, it does not have a vinyl cushion, and nobody sits on it to drink a cup of coffee while the pot finishes percolating. Number 13. The stovetop pressure cooker. A heavy aluminum pot with a locking lid and a weighted pressure valve on top that rocked and hissed like a steam engine. Your mother set it on the burner, locked it down, and walked away while the whole kitchen filled with the sound of pressure building. When the valve started dancing, supper was 20 minutes away. These things terrified children. The sound alone was enough to send you out of the kitchen. And the stories about lids blowing off and beans hitting the ceiling were not always exaggerated. Presto and Miro made the most common ones, and they lasted for decades because there was nothing electronic in them to fail. Modern pressure cookers are quiet and digital and sit on the counter. They do the same job, but nobody is afraid of them. Number 12. The hand crank flour sifter. A tin cylinder with a handle on the side that you squeezed to push the flour through a fine wire mesh. Your mother sifted flour before every cake, every batch of biscuits, every pie crust, because the flour that came out of the bag was packed and uneven and full of lumps. The sound was soft and rhythmic, metal on metal, and a little cloud of white dust settled on the counter every time she used it. Some had a single screen. Some had 3. The cheap ones rusted at the seams, and the good ones lasted your whole childhood. Today, most bakers skip the sifting entirely, and the ones who do it use a fine mesh strainer instead. Number 11. Cafe curtains. Every kitchen window in the 1950s had a pair of short curtains that covered the bottom half of the glass and left the top open for light. They hung on a tension rod and came in gingham, calico, checked cotton, or that printed fabric with little fruits and vegetables on it that looked the same in every house on the block. Your mother washed them by hand because they yellowed from cooking grease, and she ironed them flat before hanging them back up, because wrinkled curtains were a sign that a woman had given up. Nobody remembers who decided that curtains belonged on a kitchen window. But for 20 years, a kitchen without them looked naked, and the women who kept them clean never got a word of thanks for it. Everything in a 1950s kitchen was specific. There was one tool for one job, and that was that. A flour sifter did not sift sugar. A potato masher did not mash anything else. An egg timer did not time anything but eggs. The whole kitchen was a collection of objects that only made sense if you used them every day, and the women who used them knew exactly where every single one belonged. Reach into the second drawer on the left without looking, and your hand found the vegetable peeler. Open the cabinet above the stove, and the paprika was on the right. That kind of knowledge took years to build, and it vanished in a single afternoon when the kitchen was remodeled and everything moved. A modern kitchen has fewer tools that do more things, but something was lost when the tools stopped being personal and the drawers stopped belonging to one person who knew them by touch. Number 10. The wall-mounted spice rack with matching jars. A wooden or metal rack bolted to the wall with 2 rows of small glass jars, each one labeled in the same handwriting or with the same printed stickers. Cinnamon, nutmeg, paprika, oregano, thyme, sage, and a jar of cream of tartar that sat in the same spot for 15 years. The rack came as a set, and the jars were small because nobody used that much allspice. Your mother refilled them from the larger tins she kept in the pantry, and the labels faded until the only way to tell cumin from cinnamon was to open the lid and smell. Modern kitchens have spice drawers or carousel inserts built into the cabinet. The wall rack disappeared because wall space became counter space. Number 9. The hand crank egg beater. 2 interlocking beaters connected by a set of gears that turned when you cranked the handle. You held the bowl with one hand and cranked with the other, and if you went fast enough, the eggs turned into foam in about a minute. It was the only power tool in the kitchen that ran on muscle, and every woman in America had forearms to prove it. The gears stripped if you forced them, and the beaters bent if you dropped the whole thing on the floor, but a good one lasted a lifetime. Your mother beat eggs, whipped cream, mixed batter, and blended everything that a fork could not handle. Electric hand mixers made them obsolete by the 1960s, and the crank beaters went into the junk drawer and stayed there. Number 8. The set of nesting mixing bowls. 3 or 4 ceramic bowls in graduated sizes that stacked inside each other and lived in the cabinet next to the stove. The big one was for bread dough. The medium one was for cake batter. The small one was for beating eggs or mixing a sauce. They were heavy, glazed on the outside and rough on the inside. And the biggest one had a rolled lip that your mother hooked over the edge of the counter to keep it from spinning while she stirred. Pyrex made the most common ones. The primary colors set, red, blue, green, and yellow, is the one most people remember. Those bowls held every meal that came out of that kitchen, and when one broke, the whole set felt wrong without it. Number 7. The wire dish drainer. A chrome or rubber-coated wire rack that sat next to the sink with a slotted tray underneath to catch the water. Every dish, every glass, every fork and spoon went through the soapy water, got rinsed under the tap, and stood upright in the rack to dry. There was no dishwasher. The dish drainer was the dishwasher. Your mother washed dishes 3 times a day, and the rack was never empty because the next meal was already being prepared before the last one was put away. The rubber feet left marks on the counter. The tray under it always had a puddle. And taking a clean plate off the rack while it was still warm from the rinse water was one of those small, ordinary things that nobody remembers until someone mentions it. Number 6. The kitchen apron. Not one apron. A collection. Your mother had a stack of them folded in a drawer or hanging on a hook inside the pantry door. Cotton, printed with flowers or fruit or checkered patterns, some with pockets, some with ruffles, and one good one that she only wore when company came. She put an apron on before she touched a pan, and she did not take it off until the kitchen was clean. It was not decorative. It protected the dress she was already wearing because a woman in the 1950s did not change into work clothes to cook. She cooked in the same dress she wore to the grocery store, and the apron was the only thing standing between flour and her Sunday blouse. Today, an apron is a novelty gift, not a daily necessity. There is a word for what happened to these kitchens, and the word is convenience. Every object on this list was replaced by something faster, quieter, or more automatic. The hand crank beater gave way to the electric mixer. The ice cube tray gave way to the ice maker. The dish drainer gave way to the dishwasher. And each time something disappeared, the kitchen got a little easier and a little less personal. Nobody misses the burned fingers on a metal ice tray. Nobody misses sifting flour at 6 in the morning. But the kitchen that held all those things was a room that belonged to one person, and she knew every corner of it the way a carpenter knows his workshop. What replaced it is cleaner, brighter, and more efficient, but it does not belong to anyone in particular. Number 5. The Formica and Chrome Dinette Set. A table with a Formica top and chrome legs, surrounded by 4 chairs with padded vinyl seats in red, yellow, turquoise, or gray. That table was the center of the house. Homework got done on it. Bills got paid on it. Coffee got drunk at it. Arguments started across it, and apologies were made over it. The Formica surface wiped clean with a damp cloth, and the chrome legs caught the light from the window and made the whole kitchen look like it belonged in a magazine, even when it did not. Sears sold them. Montgomery Ward sold them. Local furniture stores put them in the front window with a sign that said, as low as $29. The vinyl on the chairs cracked after a few years, and your father patched it with electrical tape that never matched. The chrome pitted where water pooled around the legs, and the Formica top burned in a ring where your mother set the coffee pot down one morning and forgot to use a trivet. But nobody replaced it. You ate at that table until you left home, and your mother ate at it long after that, alone, with the television on in the other room and the same salt and pepper shaker she bought the year she married your father. Solid wood tables replaced them. Then kitchen islands replaced the tables, and the chrome dinette set went to the basement, then the garage, then the curb. Number 4. The percolator. An aluminum or stainless steel coffee pot that sat on the stovetop or plugged into the wall and made the most distinctive sound in the American kitchen. Water heated in the base, rose through a tube, bubbled over the grounds in a metal basket, and dripped back down. You heard it before you saw it. That rhythmic bubbling, steady and low, was the sound of every morning in every house in America for 30 years. The coffee it made was strong, sometimes bitter, and always too hot. Your mother let it percolate until the glass knob on top turned dark brown, and then she poured it into a ceramic mug without a handle because the handle had broken off 2 years earlier and nobody replaced it. Drip coffee makers ended the percolator in the 1970s, and the morning lost its soundtrack. Number 3. The cast iron trivet. A flat piece of cast iron, sometimes shaped like a rooster, sometimes shaped like a pineapple, sometimes just a plain circle with 3 short legs, that sat on the counter or the table to protect the surface from a hot pot. Every kitchen had 2 or 3 of them, and they were black from years of heat and grease. Your mother grabbed one without looking and set it down before the pot left the stove, and the whole operation took less than a second because she had done it 10,000 times. Nobody sells trivets as trivets anymore. They are coasters now, or wall decorations, or things you find at an estate sale for $1 and wonder what to do with. Number 2. The bread box. A metal box with a roll-top lid or a hinged door that sat on the counter and held the bread, the rolls, the buns, and sometimes a package of English muffins. It kept the bread fresh longer than leaving it on the counter in the bag, and it kept the ants out in the summer. Every kitchen had one, and every bread box was dented because it got shoved back against the wall 3 times a day. The roll-top ones made a rattling sound when you opened them, and the hinged ones squeaked because nobody oiled the hinge. Your mother kept it next to the toaster, and between the 2 of them, breakfast was covered. Plastic bags with twist ties killed the bread box. Better packaging meant the box had no purpose left. Number 1. The grease jar. a tin can or a ceramic crock that sat on the back of the stove and held the drippings from every piece of bacon, every pork chop, every roast that passed through that kitchen. Your mother poured the hot grease through a strainer and into the jar, and the jar never left the stove. She used that grease the way a modern kitchen uses butter and oil combined. Fried eggs in the morning, green beans at supper, cornbread on Sunday, biscuits when company came. That jar was seasoned by 100 meals, and the flavor it carried was the flavor of that family's kitchen and no one else's. No two grease jars tasted the same because no two families cooked the same things. It was the most personal object in the room, and it never had a label, never had a lid that fit, and never made it into a single cookbook. Doctors told everyone to stop using it. Vegetable oil took its place on the counter, and the jar went into the garbage along with everything it remembered. Storing eggs in water glass was the preservation method that kept mountain families supplied through winter months when hens stopped laying entirely and eggs became scarce. Water glass, a solution of sodium silicate and water, sealed eggshells by filling their tiny pores and preventing air and bacteria from entering. Fresh eggs were carefully lowered into crocks filled with the solution, where they remained edible for 6 months or longer without refrigeration. Families gathered eggs during peak laying season and preserved dozens at a time, ensuring protein through lean months. The technique required clean eggs with intact shells, so women handled each one carefully, rejecting any with cracks that might introduce contamination. Eggs preserved this way cooked normally, though they sometimes produced flatter whites, which mattered little when food security was the priority. The crocks were stored in cool cellars where temperatures stayed stable. Vinegar added to poaching water was the difference between restaurant-quality poached eggs and stringy disasters. Grandma's eggs held together in perfect teardrops, whites wrapped snugly around golden yolks without wispy tentacles floating everywhere. Her secret was splashing white vinegar into simmering water before cracking eggs into the pot. The acid caused whites to coagulate faster, setting the outer layer before it could drift apart. This created compact, beautiful eggs rather than ragged messes. The amount didn't need to be precise. A tablespoon or 2 per quart was plenty, and vinegar flavor cooked away completely. Grandma also swirled water gently before dropping eggs, creating a vortex helping whites wrap around yolks. She knew to use the freshest eggs since older ones had thinner whites that spread regardless. This simple addition transformed a frustrating task into something achievable. The Dutch oven answered that equation better than anything else in the kitchen. 1 heavy pot, 1 fire, 1 meal, meat on the bottom, root vegetables in the middle, dumplings dropped on top in the last 30 minutes. The cast iron held heat so evenly that nothing scorched if you set the damper right, and the tight lid trapped steam that basted the meat while the broth built below. By the time the pot came off the stove, you had protein, starch, vegetables, and gravy, all from a single vessel on a single flame. Some women started it before dawn and let it cook through the morning while they worked the garden. The broth at the bottom was thick with rendered fat and vegetable starch, and it carried forward into the next day as soup or gravy. 1 fire, 1 pot, 1 cleaning. Saving bacon grease in tin cans was the foundation of mountain cooking economy, providing fat for frying, seasoning, and flavoring that cost nothing beyond the original bacon. Every time bacon was cooked, the rendered fat was carefully strained through cloth into cans kept beside the stove, building a supply that lasted between hog killings. The grease replaced expensive butter and lard for everyday cooking, adding smoky richness to everything from fried eggs to cornbread. Women knew exactly how much grease remained in their cans and rationed it carefully through lean months. The cans were never washed, building layers of seasoned flavor that improved with age and use. Children learned early that pouring grease down the drain was wasteful foolishness that would earn sharp correction. A full grease can represent security, proof that the family could cook proper meals regardless of cash on hand. This practice continued in mountain kitchens long after it disappeared from cities. Adding a pinch of coffee grounds to gravy was grandmother's secret weapon for achieving deep, mysterious richness that made Sunday dinners unforgettable. Nobody could identify what made her gravy different. darker, more complex, with savory depth that lingered. A tiny spoonful of unused grounds stirred into pan drippings before adding flour created gravy that tasted like it simmered for hours. Coffee didn't make gravy taste like breakfast. It enhanced meaty, roasted flavors while adding professional-looking color. This worked especially well with beef and pork gravies, where slight bitterness balanced meat-fat richness. Grandma learned it from her mother during hard times when stretching flavor meant stretching resources. The grounds also helped thicken gravy slightly. Modern recipes never mention this addition, leaving cooks wondering why their results taste flat compared to Grandma's legendary version. The women who cooked on wood stoves understood heat the way a pianist understands keys. Every inch of that iron surface ran at a different temperature, and they used all of it at once. Directly over the firebox was the hottest zone, where the skillet sat for frying. 6 inches to the right, the heat dropped enough for a steady simmer. The back corner barely held a warm-up temperature, perfect for keeping gravy from skinning over. Above it all, the warming shelf, a flat ledge near the stovepipe, held plates at serving temperature, kept bread dough rising and dried herbs without scorching them. A woman working one of these stoves in the 1930s was running 4 heat zones simultaneously without a single dial. She adjusted by sliding pots across the surface, opening or closing the damper, and adding a split of hickory when the fire dropped too low. You knew the stove was right when you could hold your hand 6 inches above the surface and count to 3 before pulling away. Using vinegar to tenderize meat was how mountain families transformed tough cuts into something approaching luxury without spending money they did not have available. A few splashes of apple cider vinegar added to the marinade broke down tough muscle fibers in wild game and older livestock that would otherwise require hours of cooking. Families made their own vinegar from apple scraps, so the ingredient cost nothing beyond initial effort. The acid worked slowly overnight, penetrating deep into meat while adding subtle tanginess that complemented strong flavors of venison, squirrel, and tough old roosters. Women learned exact proportions through generations of practice, knowing how much was enough to tenderize without making meat mushy. The marinated meat could then be fried, roasted, or stewed with significantly shorter cooking times. This trick made poor cuts taste like quality and stretched limited protein into satisfying meals. A potato in oversalted soup was Grandma's emergency rescue for dishes that seemed ruined beyond repair. When a heavy hand with the salt shaker turned tonight's dinner into a sodium disaster, she didn't panic or start over. Instead, she peeled a raw potato, cut it into chunks, and dropped them into the simmering pot for 15 to 20 minutes. The potato absorbed excess salt like a sponge, pulling the harsh flavor out of the broth while adding subtle starch that improved the soup's body. Once the potato chunks turned translucent and soft, she fished them out and discarded them, leaving behind a perfectly balanced soup. This trick worked for stews, sauces, and any liquid-based dish that had gone too salty. The science was simple absorption, but the result felt like kitchen magic. Grandma kept this remedy ready because mistakes happened, and throwing away food was never an option when budgets were tight and groceries didn't come easy. Every kitchen in the mountains kept a jar of bacon grease next to the stove, and if you grew up in one of those houses, you already know the rules. You never poured it out. You never let it burn. You strained it through cheesecloth or an old piece of flour sack into a tin can or a crockery jar, and it sat there, warm, golden, ready, beside the salt and the cast iron. That jar was the starting point for nearly everything. Cornbread, fried potatoes, wilted greens, gravy, even popcorn on a Saturday night. Store-bought oil cost money nobody had, but the grease came free with breakfast every single morning. One strip of bacon produced enough fat to fry an egg and season a skillet. A month's worth could carry a household through the lean stretches between hog-killing seasons. Your grandmother never called it recycling. She called it common sense. The jar is gone from most kitchens now, and she would not understand why. Drying apples on string lines was the preservation method that turned autumn abundance into winter sustenance without any special equipment or expensive supplies. Apple slices were threaded onto long strings using needles, then hung from rafters, porches, or any warm, dry spot where air could circulate freely around each piece. The process took days or weeks depending on humidity, with families checking constantly for signs of mold or insect damage. Properly dried apples shriveled into leathery rings that could be stored in cloth bags for months without spoiling. Come winter, these dried slices were rehydrated in water or cider and cooked into pies, cobblers, and fried pies that tasted of concentrated sweetness. Children helped with threading, learning patience and satisfaction of preparing for harder times. The strings became decorative as well as practical, hanging in kitchens where their sweet smell mixed with wood smoke. Cast iron seasoning secrets were guarded knowledge that grandmothers demonstrated through decades of daily cooking rather than explaining outright. Those black skillets, passed down through generations, developed surfaces so slick that eggs slid around without a drop of oil needed. Grandma never used soap on her cast iron, just hot water, a stiff brush, and immediate drying over a warm burner to prevent rust. After every use, she rubbed a thin layer of lard across the entire surface while still warm, building layers of polymerized fat that created natural non-stick protection better than any factory coating. She knew acidic foods could strip seasoning and cook tomatoes elsewhere. She understood slow heating prevented warping. These skillets outlasted every fancy coated pan store's sell, working better each passing year. The tragedy is how many perfectly seasoned pieces sit neglected in estate sales because new generations never learned their proper care. If saving cooking water was common sense, then pot liquor was religion. The dark broth left behind after slow cooking a mess of collard greens or turnip greens with a ham hock was considered by many mountain families to be more valuable than the greens themselves. Vitamins leached during hours of simmering. Vitamin C, vitamin A, calcium, iron, concentrated in that liquid, and the old women who ladled it into cups and drank it warm knew it kept them strong through winter, even if they could not name a single nutrient. Others sopped it with cornbread, pressing the bread into the broth until it was saturated. In black Southern and Appalachian kitchens alike, pot liquor was the bridge between poverty and pride, a reminder that the humblest part of the meal often carried the most nourishment. The argument over whether to dunk the cornbread or crumble it into the liquor has started more kitchen debates than politics ever did. Today, most greens drain straight into the sink. Using coffee grounds for scrubbing pots was how mountain women kept cast iron and heavy cookware clean without wasting precious soap. The coarse texture of spent grounds provided gentle abrasion that lifted stuck-on food and grease without scratching seasoned surfaces that had taken years to build. Women collected grounds after brewing, keeping them in a tin near the wash basin where they stayed slightly damp and ready for use. The natural oils in coffee also helped condition cast iron while cleaning, maintaining the protective layer that prevented rust. This method cost nothing since the grounds would otherwise be discarded, embodying the waste-nothing philosophy that defined mountain households. Children learned to scrub pots this way before being trusted with more delicate dishes. The faint coffee smell that lingered on clean cookware became associated with spotless kitchens. This trick worked so well that many families never purchased commercial scouring products. Onion skins for dyeing Easter eggs produced colors that store-bought tablets could never match: deep amber, rusty brown, and burnished gold that looked like treasures. Grandma saved yellow and brown skins for weeks before Easter, stuffing them into paper bags. Eggs wrapped in those papery skins, secured with rubber bands, then simmered gently in water with vinegar to help color adhere. Results were stunning natural marbling effects, each egg emerging unique. Some grandmothers pressed small leaves against shells before wrapping, creating botanical prints impossibly delicate. Red onion skins produced lavender tones while yellow created deep golds. This connected families to centuries of tradition when synthetic dyes didn't exist. The eggs were completely safe since onion skins were food grade. Children gathered watching eggs transform, learning patience and appreciating beauty from simple natural sources. Hog killing day in the mountains was not a chore. It was an event, and every family within walking distance came to help because the work was enormous and the rules were absolute. Nothing was wasted. The hams and shoulders went to the smokehouse for months of curing over hickory. The leaf lard, fat from around the kidneys, prized above all other fat, was rendered slowly for baking. Intestines were cleaned, scraped, turned inside out, and stuffed with seasoned sausage. The head simmered for hours until the meat was picked from the skull and pressed into head cheese with vinegar and spices. Feet became souse, skin became cracklings, rendered crisp and crumbled into cornbread. The blood in some Scots-Irish mountain families was caught in a pan and cooked into pudding. Bones went into the soup pot and simmered until they gave up everything. One animal, slaughtered in November, fed a family through March. Wrapping food in wet newspaper before burying it in coals was a technique that created steam cooking without any equipment at all beyond what most families had available. The dampened paper protected food from direct contact with ash, while moisture trapped inside created pressure that cooked fish and vegetables evenly throughout. Mountain families learned this from Native American traditions and adapted it to their own needs, using whatever paper was available from rare newspapers to catalog pages. The paper charred on the outside while food inside steamed to perfection, emerging clean and thoroughly cooked. Timing was crucial because too long meant paper burned through while too short left food underdone. Experienced cooks developed instinct for judging coals and thickness. The technique worked especially well for delicate fish that fell apart when fried, keeping flesh intact while infusing subtle smoke flavor. Children watched this magic happen at fish fries. Ice water for flaky pie crust was the non-negotiable rule that separated Grandma's legendary pies from the dense, tough failures other cooks produced. She kept a glass of ice water on the counter and added it tablespoon by tablespoon to her flour and shortening mixture, using only enough to bring the dough together. The cold was essential because it kept the fat from melting before the crust hit the oven. Those tiny pieces of solid shortening created steam pockets during baking, which produced the flaky layers that made pie crust shatter delicately with each bite. Warm water would melt the fat immediately, resulting in a tough, chewy crust nobody wanted to eat. Grandma also chilled her mixing bowl and handled the dough as little as possible, understanding that warmth from hands could ruin everything. These small details separated her Thanksgiving pies from everyone else's attempts. In the deep hollows of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, lemons were a luxury that arrived by rail, if they arrived at all. So when a woman wanted a tart, custard-style pie, she reached for the bottle of apple cider vinegar on the shelf. Mixed with eggs, butter, sugar, and a little flour, then baked in a lard crust, the vinegar lost its bite in the oven and left behind something close to lemon custard, bright, tangy, with a sweetness that crept up on you. Church cookbooks in the 1940s listed it as mock lemon pie or surprise pie. And the surprise was that nobody could guess the main ingredient. The chemistry worked because heated vinegar partially neutralizes against the sugar while the volatile acids evaporate, leaving only brightness behind. Some Appalachian versions swapped white sugar for sorghum, which gave the filling a deeper, smoky quality. By the 70s, it had slipped out of most recipe boxes. The women who made it best never measured. They poured until it smelled right. Greasing cast iron with fatback was the secret behind every properly seasoned skillet in rural Appalachian kitchens across the Mountain South. Fatback, the thick layer of fat from a hog's back, was rubbed across cast iron cookware while still warm, creating a protective coating that prevented rust and built the non-stick surface that made mountain cooking possible. Women saved every scrap specifically for this purpose, keeping pieces wrapped in cloth near the stove where they stayed soft and ready to use. The process was repeated after every use, building layers of seasoning that turned cheap cast iron into family heirlooms passed through generations. A well-seasoned skillet required no additional oil for frying and released food effortlessly. Children learned this ritual by watching mothers perform it hundreds of times before being trusted with precious cookware. This simple trick transformed basic equipment into tools that lasted lifetimes and cooked food with unmatched quality. A pinch of salt in coffee was Grandma's answer to bitter brews that made faces pucker and stomachs clench. She didn't add sugar to mask bad coffee. She prevented bitterness with a few grains of salt added to grounds before percolating. Salt ions block taste receptors perceiving bitterness, allowing coffee's natural sweetness and complexity to shine. This worked especially well with cheaper blends and older beans that lost freshness, turning mediocre coffee into something smooth. During the Depression, when families couldn't afford quality beans, this trick made every pot palatable without expensive cream or sugar. Grandma added salt so instinctively she never measured. Just a pinch between fingers dropped into the basket. Visitors commented on how smooth her coffee tasted, never guessing the secret in the salt shaker. Modern baristas rediscovered this technique, but for decades it lived only in grandmother's muscle memory. Long before any of those vegetables hit the table, the most radical trick in these kitchens started not at the stove, but in the front yard, with a hollow log, a bucket, and a pile of fireplace ash. Water poured slowly over the ashes and caught in a wooden bucket below produced lye, and that lye transformed dried corn kernels into hominy through a process called nixtamalization, a technique with Cherokee and indigenous roots going back thousands of years. The kernels soaked until their skins slipped off, swelling into something white, tender, and entirely different from the hard yellow corn that went in. What the old cooks could not have known was that this process unlocked niacin trapped inside the corn, a vitamin the body cannot absorb from untreated kernels, and it was the reason mountain families who ate hominy avoided the pellagra that devastated communities further south. The same ash that heated the house also made the soap and freed the nutrition in the grain. Making gravy from pan drippings was the technique that turned every meat dish into 2 meals and wasted nothing in kitchens where every calorie counted towards survival. After frying or roasting meat, the browned bits and rendered fat left in the pan became foundation for rich gravies that stretched protein into something more filling. Flour was sprinkled directly into hot fat and stirred constantly until it formed a paste that cooked to golden brown, developing deep, nutty flavors. Milk, water, or broth was added slowly while stirring to prevent lumps, creating smooth gravy that captured every bit of flavor from the original meat. Children learned to make gravy by standing beside mothers at the stove, learning exact motions and timing that defined good cooking. The gravy was poured over biscuits, potatoes, and cornbread, making small amounts of meat feed large families. Nothing was scraped into garbage when this knowledge lived in households. Egg shells in the coffee pot produced the smoothest, least bitter coffee that modern filters and expensive machines still cannot replicate. Grandma crushed clean eggshells and added them directly to the coffee grounds before brewing in her percolator. The calcium carbonate in shells neutralized coffee's acidic compounds, while the shells themselves attracted and trapped bitter sediments that would otherwise cloud the brew. The result was remarkably clean-tasting coffee with a mellow smoothness that seemed almost creamy. This technique dated back generations when coffee was often coarse ground and percolators were the only brewing method available. Grandma saved shells specifically for this purpose, rinsing and drying them before crushing. Visitors always commented on how her coffee tasted different, better, smoother, more drinkable than anywhere else. She never revealed her secret, letting them wonder what expensive brand she used when the answer sat right there in the compost bowl. Nobody in those kitchens ever seasoned a skillet on purpose. They just cooked in it, morning, noon, and night, and the iron did the rest. Every pour of grease, every batch of cornbread, every round of fried okra laid down another thin layer of polymerized fat that turned raw metal into something slicker than any factory coating. The old women knew which skillet was ready for eggs and which one still needed more time. They knew never to use soap, never to let it soak, and never to put it away wet. A good cast iron pan passed from mother to daughter like jewelry, heavier than it looked, black as night, and worth more than anything in the cupboard. Wagner and Griswold foundries produced the best ones through the 1950s, and those old pans are still the ones people fight over at estate sales. The new ones come pre-seasoned from a factory. The old ones came seasoned by a lifetime of somebody's hands. Cooking cornbread on a hoe blade was field cooking born from necessity when workers needed hot food far from any kitchen. The broad, flat blade of a garden hoe, scrubbed clean and heated over an open fire, became a makeshift griddle that cooked cornmeal batter into crusty cakes. Workers mixed batter in the morning and carried it to fields in covered pails, cooking fresh bread during midday breaks when hunger demanded more than cold biscuits. The technique gave hoe cakes their name, connecting the food directly to the tool and labor that defined rural life. The metal heated unevenly, requiring skill to rotate the blade and prevent burning while ensuring the center cooked through. The finished cakes had crispy edges and tender centers, tasting of smoke and honest work. This cooking method represented the ingenuity of people who refused to go hungry simply because proper equipment was unavailable. In late summer, when the apple trees bent heavy with fruit, the real work started. Not the picking, but the preserving. She peeled them in one long spiral with a paring knife worn thin from years of use, and the peels went straight into a pot for apple butter. The slices she threaded onto lengths of cotton twine with a darning needle and hung from the ceiling beams or the porch rafters. They dried in the warm air over days, shrinking into leathery rings that lasted through winter. Come January, those dried apples rehydrated with sugar and spices for fried pies, or slow-cooked into filling for a stack cake, or simmered into what mountain families called cooked fruit, their word for applesauce. No dehydrator, no canning equipment, no electricity required, just twine, a knife, and a warm room. The women who did this every fall did it the same way their mothers had, and the ones who remember can close their eyes and be back in that kitchen the moment the smell returns. Wood cost labor and labor cost time, so every fire had to justify itself. Cooking on the shovel blade was frontier ingenuity at its most practical when families lacked proper cookware or needed quick meals away from the kitchen hearth. A flat-bladed shovel, cleaned thoroughly and heated over open flames, became an instant griddle for frying eggs, toasting bread, or cooking small portions of meat. Field workers carried shovels anyway, making them dual-purpose tools that fed hungry workers during long days away from home. The metal heated evenly when held at the right angle over flames, and the long handle kept hands safe from the fire. Fathers showed sons how to judge temperature by watching metal change color and feeling heat radiating upward. Food cooked directly on the blade picked up a faint mineral taste that became associated with outdoor work and simple satisfaction. This technique required no additional equipment and worked anywhere a fire could be built, making it invaluable for remote work. Flour sack towels served purposes modern kitchen linens simply cannot match, and Grandma kept stacks for every task imaginable. These weren't purchased. They came from fabric bags that flour and sugar were packaged in. The cotton was tightly woven, lint-free, and incredibly absorbent, perfect for straining homemade cheese, covering rising bread dough, and drying dishes without streaks. Grandma bleached them white for kitchen use, but some women sewed printed versions into children's clothing and quilts. The towels improved with washing, becoming softer over years rather than falling apart like paper towels. They could be sterilized with boiling water for canning season and wrapped around delicate items for storage. When one finally wore thin, it became a cleaning rag, then patches for other towels. The journey from flour packaging to dust rag took decades, demonstrating a relationship with materials that disposable culture has abandoned. When the lettuce went limp or the carrots turned soft, nobody in a mountain kitchen threw them out. They filled a bowl with cold water, stirred in a teaspoon of salt, and let those tired vegetables sit for about an hour. The cells in the leaves and roots absorbed the water, the walls stiffened back up, and what looked ready for the compost pile came back crisp enough to serve. Household guides in the 1950s documented the trick, and decades later, food scientists confirmed that cold water increases pressure inside plant cell walls, while the salt bolsters the pectin that holds them rigid. The mountain women who used it every week did not need a laboratory. They had watched their own mothers do it. Overnight, soaking could bloat vegetables too far, so the 1-hour window was the sweet spot. Long enough to revive, short enough to keep the texture honest. Nothing left the kitchen until it had given everything it could. Smoking meat in the chimney was how mountain families preserved pork, game, and fish, using smoke from fires they were already burning for warmth and cooking. Hooks or racks installed inside chimneys held meat in the rising smoke stream, which dried and flavored the flesh while depositing preservative compounds that prevented spoilage. The technique required careful attention because too much heat cooked the meat while too little failed to preserve it, so families positioned racks at exactly the right height. Different woods produced different flavors, with hickory and apple being prized while pine was avoided for its resinous taste. The process took days or weeks depending on the size of cuts, with someone checking regularly to ensure even smoking. Meat preserved this way lasted through entire winters without refrigeration, providing essential protein. The chimney served double duty, heating the home while preparing food for storage throughout the winter months. Butter wrappers saved for greasing pans represented Grandma's understanding that nothing useful should ever hit the trash bin. Every time she unwrapped butter, that waxy paper went into a refrigerator container, accumulating until needed. When pans required greasing, Grandma rubbed residual butter across surfaces with perfect economy. The thin coating was exactly right, enough to prevent sticking without excess fat making baked goods greasy or cookies spread too thin. Children learned to save wrappers automatically. The practice meant never dirtying a brush or wasting whole butter pats on greasing duties. Those wrappers worked better than cooking sprays because they left no chemical aftertaste and created even coverage. During wartime rationing, when butter was precious, this became essential survival knowledge. Today, we throw away perfectly good wrappers without a second thought. Before electric meat slicers showed up in butcher shops, mountain cooks had their own method for cutting beef or pork thin enough to fry fast and stretch further. They set the piece in the icebox, or later the freezer, for 20 to 30 minutes. Not long enough to freeze solid, but just enough to firm the muscle fibers so a sharp knife could glide through in clean, paper-thin slices impossible at room temperature. The result was meat that cooked in seconds, perfect for country fried steak pounded flat and breaded, or for jerky strips laid across racks in the smokehouse. A single round steak, partially frozen and sliced with care, produced enough portions for 6 where a thick cut would have served 3. The trick required nothing but patience and a blade kept sharp on a whetstone. Nobody advertised this. It passed from one pair of hands to the next, along with the understanding that making something last mattered just as much as making it taste right. Wrapping meat in corn husks before roasting was a preservation and cooking technique that kept moisture locked in while adding subtle sweetness to the finished dish. Fresh or dried corn husks were soaked until pliable, then wrapped tightly around seasoned cuts of pork, game, or poultry before being buried in coals or placed in Dutch ovens. The husks protected meat from direct heat while trapping steam inside, essentially creating a natural cooking pouch that basted the meat in its own juices. The corn imparted a faint sweetness that complemented pork especially well, creating flavor that seemed fancier than the simple method suggested. Families saved husks from corn season specifically for this purpose, drying them in bundles that hung from rafters until needed. The technique required no special equipment and produced consistently tender results. This method connected cooking to the harvest cycle, using every part of what the land provided. The bread heel trick for keeping brown sugar soft was Grandmother's clever solution that cost nothing but solved everything. Brown sugar turned into a brick within days of opening, requiring a hammer to break apart. Grandma simply dropped a bread heel, the end piece nobody wanted anyway, into the container and sealed it tight. Within hours, rock-hard sugar transformed into soft, scoopable sweetness. Bread released moisture slowly, rehydrating the molasses coating without making sugar wet or clumpy. This hack turned kitchen scraps into problem solvers, using unwanted bread ends children pushed aside. Some grandmothers used apple slices or orange peels instead, adding subtle flavor while restoring texture. The trick worked for weeks, keeping sugar ready for cookies and oatmeal. Modern cooks buy expensive terracotta discs, never knowing a simple bread heel could solve the problem. Before white sugar reached the mountain stores at a price anyone could pay, sorghum was the sweetener that held Appalachian kitchens together. And making it was an event that shut down the whole hollow for a day. The cane grew tall as corn along creek beds, planted from seeds saved the year before. Come October, families stripped the leaves, cut the stalks, and fed them through a wooden roller press hitched to a mule walking in circles. The green juice ran into a copper evaporator pan over a wood fire, and from there it was stirring, hours of it, skimming the green foam, watching the color darken, waiting for the moment the syrup sheeted off the paddle instead of dripping. The tradition carried African roots brought through enslaved people into Appalachia, and by the 1940s, Kentucky led the nation in sorghum production. A single fall batch filled enough jars to sweeten biscuits, cakes, and coffee all winter. The stir-offs are mostly gone now. The taste they left behind is not. Adding molasses to beans was the sweetening trick that transformed plain pinto beans into something approaching Boston baked beans without expensive ingredients. A generous pour of sorghum molasses or blackstrap stirred into the bean pot during the last hour of cooking added depth, color, and a subtle sweetness that balanced the earthy bean flavor. The molasses also helped thicken the pot liquor into a glossy sauce that clung to each bean. Mountain families grew their own sorghum cane and pressed it into syrup, making molasses an affordable sweetener when white sugar was luxury few could afford. The combination of beans, molasses, and salt pork became a complete meal that satisfied for hours and cost almost nothing to prepare. Children often preferred molasses beans to plain, making them easier to feed during lean times. This technique spread through Appalachian communities as families shared recipes at church gatherings and community events. Wooden spoon across the pot prevented boil-over disasters that left stovetops covered in starchy foam and required hours of scrubbing. Grandma laid a wooden spoon horizontally across the top of any pot cooking pasta, rice, or potatoes, and somehow the water never climbed over the rim. The science involved temperature differences. Wood doesn't conduct heat like metal, so bubbles contacting the cooler spoon popped before they could cascade over. The dry surface also burst the foam's surface tension. This simple trick meant Grandma could step away from the stove to tend other tasks without returning to find a mess spreading across the burners. She didn't know the physics, but she knew the wooden spoon worked every single time. Children learned this instinctively, placing spoons across pots without being told, carrying the habit into their own kitchens decades later. It cost nothing and prevented countless cleanup headaches. A single pot of pinto beans could feed a family for 3 days if the woman cooking knew what she was doing, and she always did. Day one was the beans themselves, slow cooked with a ham hock, an onion, and enough water to cover, served over cornbread with raw onion on the side. Day two, she added water and a handful of elbow macaroni, turning leftover beans into a thicker soup that tasted different enough to feel new. Day three, in went a can of tomatoes and a few drop dumplings made from flour, lard, and a splash of milk. 3 nights, 3 textures, 3 flavors, all from one pot of dried beans that cost pennies. The trick was never letting it boil dry and knowing when to add the water. Too early and it thinned out. Too late and the bottom scorched, which meant losing the fond that gave day 3 its depth. You learned it by standing at the stove beside her, watching the bubble rate. Soaking beans with baking soda was a trick that solved 2 problems at once in mountain kitchens where fuel was precious and time was always scarce for busy families. A pinch of baking soda added to soaking water softened dried beans faster by breaking down their tough outer skins, reducing cooking time by hours. For families burning wood, they had chopped themselves. Shorter cooking times meant real savings in labor and resources. The alkaline water also neutralized compounds that caused digestive discomfort, making beans easier on stomachs. Women learned exact amounts through trial and error, knowing too much soda left a soapy taste while too little made no difference. The beans soaked overnight in crocks near the warm stove, absorbing water and releasing starches. By morning, they were plump and ready, cooking to creamy softness in half the usual time. This knowledge passed quietly between neighbors as practical wisdom that made survival easier. 25 things, and not one of them was expensive or rare or hard to find. They were ordinary objects in ordinary kitchens, and the women who used them every day never once thought to take a picture or write anything down. If you grew up in one of those kitchens, you remember the sound of the percolator and the feel of the metal ice tray and the smell of bacon grease on a cast iron pan. Pick one thing from this list and tell someone about it. Describe it, where it sat, what it sounded like. That is how these things survive. Hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.